On today's show, we preview Game 5 of the Cup Final with Lord Stanley's mug in the building. Can Florida make it a 6-game series? We'll touch on that. William Nylander lands on the Athletics trade bait board, but what would a contract extension look like before we get into trade discussion? All that more coming up on today's edition of the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Locked On Leafs podcast, a daily Maple Leaf-centric podcast hosted by myself, Mike DiStefano from TSN, and my guy Dave Morassutti from Sportsnet. First and foremost, before we get into the hockey, congratulations to the Denver Nuggets for winning the NBA championship, and a special congratulations to Jamal Murray from Kitchener, Ontario. Massive for them all series long. So little Canadian content in the NBA Finals and a big part of it, obviously, for him. So just wanted to give a quick special shout out, I suppose, to Denver and to Jamal Murray. Did you get a chance to watch any of the game there, Dave?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that fourth quarter was so intense.
It was just extremely back and forth until the final, 30 seconds.
We saw a little vintage Kyle Lowry in that quarter, too. Shout out for former Raptor Kyle Lowry doing his best to try to keep that series going. But, man, I'll tell you this, that foul call late in the fourth quarter, the one that stood after the review.
Ridiculous.
I will give Denver credit because that's something that held them at first, and then they kind of said, okay, we're going to push this aside. We're going to keep pushing forward. So credit them for doing that. But yeah, what a game. What a game to end that NBA Finals.
Yeah. It was an outrageous foul, by the way. No chance that should have been a foul on Jimmy Butler, or when Jimmy Butler kicked Aaron Gordon in the nuts, and somehow the balls ended up getting the foul on the play. But whatever. I'm not an NBA official. It sounds like NBA officiating is just as bad as NHL officiating sometimes when it comes to looking at reviews, thinking one thing is obvious, and all of a sudden, nope, not the case. All righty, whatever. With that, that's one Florida team down, one more Florida team to go, potentially, if you're Vegas. I mean, was this a bad omen? If you're the Florida Panthers, seeing Miami go down in 5 games the night prior?
Well, I mean, that was the thing about these two series. You have a powerhouse team going up against an underdog, both underdogs.
Not just an 8th seed Miami team.
Yeah.
It's pretty the same thing. You have two division winners in Denver and in Vegas, going up against the 8th seeded Miami Heat / Florida Panthers. Both of these Florida teams made miraculous runs all the way to the finals, where they finally got stopped dead in their tracks to a team that's just flat out better. And it is funny the parallels between the NBA and the NHL finals.
Yeah, no, it's crazy how similar both leagues are in this regard, because we always hear about, both teams usually in the NBA finals are superstar teams.
Yeah.
In the NHL, you can get that Cinderella story a little more often. So it's, I mean, what a time for Miami too, because I'm going to bring up another sports reference, but Leo Messi signing in Inter Miami.
Yes.
At the same time that both teams are in championship finals, what a time. Miami's already a fun place, and now they just get more fun.
Yeah, but I mean, the Heat are now eliminated. They're not bringing home a championship, and the Panthers are down 3-1 in their series as they try and extend it tonight in Vegas. So we'll see if they can do that and keep the fun vibes alive in South Beach for a couple more days. But what what chance do you actually give them of doing that and forcing a game 6 tonight? Like, do you think that it ends tonight? Does Vegas win the championship in 5, much to the way that you just saw the Denver Nuggets do it with Miami? And Vegas, not a very far way to go to party on the Strip. I'll say that too. If they can accomplish the feat in 5 in Vegas, as opposed to having to go back to Florida and then fly back to Vegas and then hit the Strip. Be pretty easy to go straight from T-Mobile Arena right out onto the street.
I just we kind of discussed this when Florida lost Game 4. Like, that's a banged up team. Like, they've pushed really far into these playoffs, farther than anyone could have thought, and you're starting to see that catch up to them. They played a lot of games. Yeah, they had the sweep, and then the 5 games in the rounds 2 and 3, but it's not just the how many games they played, it's the physicality that they bring. This is what happens when you have a team that's so physical. Injuries more likely to happen, and it takes a toll on you physically. So that's why I don't see Florida extending it. But again, they just need to do what they've done throughout these playoffs, keep it close, and you just get that break, or you get that one goal you need to extend it. So not out of the realm of possibilities, but it's going to be really tough to imagine that.
Yeah, in terms of who's playing tonight, Kachuk is technically day-to-day. There was no answers to whether or not he was going to play when asked yesterday. They, asked, and they said he's getting treatment and they'll know more tomorrow. But very clearly, if you watch the way that he played the other nights pre-game, and even, the fact that he had, 10 minutes between shifts in the third period before finally going out there, like, he was just gutting through that entire game, and then tried to go out there in the last 2 minutes with the net empty to try and spur some sort of miraculous comeback and take it to OT again. Almost did too. But he's clearly playing at 50%. I mean, his shoulder is not looking good. And if you're the Florida Panthers, you have Kachuk at 50%, maybe even less than. I don't like your chances at being able to come back in the series. I mean, can Bob steal a game here tomorrow or tonight in Game 5? Perhaps he could, but ultimately, I think that this one is all but over. This is Vegas's cup to win. They're just the deeper team. They're the faster team, the stronger team. They're really the special teams have been crushing the Florida Panthers in all aspects of the game. Vegas has been better, even between the pipes. Obviously, Aiden Hill's been better than Sergei Bobrovsky has been so far through the Stanley Cup final. So I won't be shocked at all if this thing gets wrapped up tonight, similarly to the way that we just saw the Denver Nuggets do to Miami in 5 games.
Yeah, no, and it would, like, Florida should give they're getting a lot of credit because nobody expected them to be there, but this is kind of what happens. It reminds me a lot about Montreal when they went up against Tampa in 2021. Like, there's only the Cinderella dust does wear off at some point, right? And I think it's getting to that midnight point with Florida. Like, I give them a lot of credit. They found that formula. They were able to ride as long as possible. Unfortunately, they found a team in Vegas that was able to overlook that. And so I also like watching the Nuggets win tonight in the finals. To win it at home, it's such a better ambiance and atmosphere.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if you remember when the Raptors won in 2019. Like, it was
road. They closed down the Oracle. Remember they closed down the Oracle?
Yep. Literally closed down the Oracle, and Masai Ujiri almost didn't get to celebrate because of that. Like, the police officer wouldn't let him out on the floor till Kyle Lowry was like, yeah, no, this guy built this team. So
yeah, he's the president of the franchise. Let this man on the floor, please.
Yeah. So I just think the idea of winning at home, winning in Vegas too, like, the Capitals won it in Vegas back in, what was it, 2018?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
They had it was just a party of all parties, and apparently it's part of the reason why maybe they didn't do so well the following year after that. But I
hope he's still swimming in fountains, I think.
Oh, I would just love to see what that party would be like. Like, if you're in Vegas right now and you have a chance to not even go to the game, but be a part of the after party, it's gonna be unreal.
So, question for you. If they do finish it up in 5 games, who wins the Conn Smythe trophy?
I'm sticking with Jonathan Marchessault. I'm
So,
sticking with him.
currently on FanDuel, Jonathan Marchessault is heavy favorite at minus 600. But I got to tell you, for Jack Eichel to be plus 2,100 is such good value. I am currently placing a wager as we speak on Jack Eichel to win because there is a strong chance that he still could. I mean, to me, he's number 2 behind Marchessault, and the fact that you're getting 21-1 odds on that, I think is just ridiculous. Like, you throw $5 down on this thing, and you're winning $100. Like, I think that's insane. So, Jack Eichel to me is actually an interesting little sprinkle. I would call it a value bet at this point. Is Marchessault the likely winner? Yeah, probably based on how many goals he scored in this series and he's come up big and clutch. But Jack Eichel, man, for him to be at 21-1 compared to 1-6, that's just supremely good value over on FanDuel. But we'll see what happens tonight.
I remember when we were giving our thoughts on who we thought would win it. Beginning of the series, I did say Jonathan Marchessault, and I got him at plus 230. So I got him at plus money. So just to see how much is swayed just from the start of the series till now.
Plus 230. He was like plus 650 at the start of the series.
Okay, maybe I did it after game 1. Might have been after game 1 because I think he scored twice in game 1.
Yeah.
So maybe that's what happened.
Either
way, I got him at plus odds because you can't go look anywhere. You can't get him at plus odds.
No, God, no. He's heavy favorite. Heavy favorite. But I got him at plus 650 to win Conn Smythe. I got him at plus 750 to score the most goals in the series. Both of those looking good right now. Yep. And then I also have 14-1, a wager I placed back in November. A little futures on the Golden Knights to win the Cup. So, if the Golden Knights win tomorrow night or tonight rather, by the time this is being heard, and you've got Jonathan Marchessault with a little bit more hardware, I'll have a nice night. Let me tell you, Dave. Very, very nice night. All right, so we'll see what happens in that game, though. Should be a good one, obviously. I'm kind of hoping that this actually ends tonight. I don't know about you, but I'm ready. I don't know why, and I know I'm gonna hate myself for saying this later on in the week, but I'm ready for the offseason to begin, and this, I don't know why this Cup final just has not. It's been taking so long because there's been so many days in between games where I'm at the point, it's let's just wrap this puppy up and let's just get on with the offseason. There's already been a couple of trades, so now I'm kind of itching for more, and I know that'll all open up once it's over and the GMs get back to business in the trade market. So hopefully it does end tonight. That's the selfishness in me hoping that happens, and then we could get the silly season underway, the off season. Speaking of silly season and the off season, on the other side, Dave, let's get into what's going on with William Nylander. We've talked a lot about Austin Matthews and the impending potential extension for Austin Matthews, but Nylander's in the exact same boat come July 1. So we'll talk about the likelihood of that happening, what it would take. And he also landed on the Athletics trade bait board. So we'll also have a little chit chat as to why we think that could be, which could tie into the contract discussion. So we'll do all that on the other side. But first, let me tell you guys about one of today's show sponsors, and it's our good pals at eBay Motors. A championship team is about each player being a perfect fit. Same with their vehicle. So for parts that fit, head to eBay Motors and look for the green check. Stay in the game with eBay Guaranteed Fit. ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. It's Mike DiStefano and Dave Morassutti, a daily Maple Leaf-centric podcast. We do it each weekday, Monday through Friday. If you've enjoyed the conversation so far, you want to stay up to date with what's going on within Leafs Nation, make sure you are subscribed to us wherever you get your podcast, also up on YouTube we were a 365 kind of show all year round. We'll be putting out Leafs content even in the summer during the off season. We'll still be keeping you up to date on what's going on in Leafland. And right now, one of the big conversations that's happening within the Maple Leafs nation is what's going on with William Nylander. There's over the course of the last few weeks, it seems like the conversation moves swiftly from Kyle Dubas to Brad Treliving, and then it's like, okay, what's going to happen with the coach? And then now it's, what's going to happen with Austin Matthews? Is he a priority? And now all of a sudden the conversation has moved on to William Nylander and what's going to happen with him. Because Dave, as we both know, he's got one more year left on his contract at $6.9 million. But once that year is done, he is a unrestricted free agent, and he could walk as a free agent and go wherever he pleases. So what the Maple Leafs are hoping to do and could do come July 1st is come to some sort of agreement on a contract extension, get this guy signed up long-term, and hopefully we don't have to deal with any of that.
Yeah.
That being said, Dave, what do you think is the likelihood of this actually happening? The fact that William Nylander does indeed end up signing an extension with the Maple Leafs. Like if you had to put an odds percentage of him being extended by the start of training camp, what would you say?
I'll go 70%.
Okay, so you think that there's a
chance, but
it's a pretty good chance.
I don't say I can't guarantee. I mean, no one can guarantee it, but right. I'm not like ready to say like it's fait accompli, ready, it's done. I think it's a high possibility because of just the way that things are kind of lining up contract wise, and where the cap is going. I think the Leafs are they're gonna stick to their guns on keeping these big boys around, and they're gonna do their best to do it. It just seems like that's the road they want to go down.
So what does a Nylander deal look like for you then? If that happens, if he does have an extension in place at some point this summer, what do you think that deal looks like?
Oof. I think this is one where they're gonna push for term. They're not gonna give him I know some are. I had a discussion about this actually on the Offside Hockey Talk podcast. Great folks over there, and I said the important thing here to remember is, you got to be careful with how much term you give, because you can give try and get the full 8 years, and I think that would be ideal in a lot of ways to ensure that flexibility going forward. But a lot of players can see that the salary cap is going up, and that just means that more teams have more money to give to the higher end players. So I guarantee a player like Nylander is going to see them and say, you know what, why am I going to do 8 years where maybe if I think I have another shot at free agency here, let me give myself 3 years. I would say 3 years is what he's probably going to look for. And if I'm the Leafs, that's going to be tough to say, have to constantly do this roundabout again. That's why you try to get as much max term as you can, because he's 27 right now. I can't see them. I think he'll be 28. Sorry, no, he just turned 27. So he's 27 now. I can't see them wanting to go too long. I say like maybe 6-7 years, try to do that again. But I think Nylander is going to want that 3 years if he really wants to take advantage of one last contract.
Yeah, if that. Like we saw Vladislav Gavrikov sign a 2-year deal the other day in LA, and the reasoning for it is because the salary cap is expected to jump drastically 2 years from now. Now keep in mind that Nylander, if you're talking 3 years, he's under contract next year as well. So that's actually 4 years from now that he would become a UFA, right? Just for those who are wondering. So I could totally see that happening. I could even see him signing a 2-year deal or a shorter deal. Like I could see it just because it sounds as though we may see a lot more of these shorter deals for players to kind of time the market for when the cap jumps drastically in a couple of seasons, about $5-6 million as opposed to just the $1 million jump it's going to have next season. So we're expecting to see some more shorter term deals. But to your point, I don't know if you're necessarily going to do that with if the Leafs are going to want to do that with a guy like Nylander. I think they would want to get him signed long term. I kind of look at, like, when I'm looking at a comparable for William Nylander's contract, I was just taking a look at like where the money is, some guys who are in the range, between 8.5, 9.5 million, I think. And the name that I kind of stumbled upon where I think it's like, okay, I think he's worth that money. What about the name Matthew Barzal? Like, I think that could be a decent contract comparable for William Nylander. Like, if you look at Barzal, he signed a deal. Was it last year? Last offseason it was, I believe, at $9.15 million. So I think that is actually a contract that I believe, the Maple Leafs could look at and say, hey, here's a decent player comparable. He's similar age to you. He's 26. Like, he's a year younger, actually. And, you're both good goal-scoring playmakers. He plays down the middle, but also kind of kicks out to the wing. So you could even argue and say, hey, he could play center sometimes. That's worth a little bit more money, So maybe $9 million is about where they may want to settle at, but I could see them just sitting there and looking at that deal and saying, no, we want either exactly the same or like 9.25 or something like that. Maybe even a little bit of a bump up because the salary cap percentage will be in a different situation next season than it will be, obviously, when that contract was originally signed by Barzal. But, like, does that sound like a decent comparable for you, like a Matt Barzal type of contract?
I think so. I mean, I talked about on that podcast about Mikko Rantanen too, just because of like comparable.
I think Rantanen's a far superior player.
He's a better player because of the role he plays, and obviously the point production's there.
He's just a better player. Like he's just a better player. I don't even know. Like, there's no qualifiers there. I mean, this guy scored 55 goals this year.
Like, that's a ceiling. If you're like looking for like a ceiling for Nylander, like you can't go past that. Because I know Rantanen signed, I think it was 2 seasons ago. It was just before McKinnon signed his deal.
Yeah.
So not that far off. And I'm just saying that in terms of just trying to figure out that sweet spot, right? Tim Stützle, obviously a younger player, 8.3. Like, I think Nylander, whatever number, is going to start close to 9. I can't see him going below 8.5.
No, God, no. No. I don't see that happen either. Like, if they're looking to get him at under 8.5, I don't see that negotiation going very well. Here's the one thing that is somewhat, I don't want to say worrisome, but it definitely is a bit of a red flag when we're talking about the Maple Leafs trying to negotiate with William Nylander. Nylander's agent is Louis Gross, Dave. Louis Gross. Are you familiar with Louis Gross's other high-profile athletes in the NHL?
1,000%. And it's one Brad Treliving knows quite too well. Not in a good way. That would be one Johnny Gaudreau.
Johnny Gaudreau. And then if y'all remember what happened last year in Calgary, Brad Treliving kind of botched the Johnny Gaudreau negotiations with Louis Gross, and it did not go well. He ended up walking as a free agent after Treliving apparently thought, they were heading towards getting a deal done. Craig Conroy said this exact same thing at his press conference when he took over as general manager in Calgary a couple of weeks ago. And ultimately, there's a report out there that Treliving lowballed him at the beginning of the window of extension, like July 1 of last year or the year prior, lowballed him an offer, and he never forgot that. And then when he went on and had that outstanding season, he essentially decided, I don't want to stay in Calgary. I felt disrespected, and he decided to go and take literally less money in Columbus. So is that a concern? The fact that, there is, I don't want to say bad blood or maybe bad faith between Treliving and Louis Gross, but there was a situation where Treliving and Gross were unable to come to an agreement prior to, during that whole situation. Does that mean that it's going to happen again? No, not necessarily. No. But I do think that it is definitely notable that Nylander and Gaudreau have the exact same agent, and Treliving didn't go so well when he tried to negotiate with Gaudreau and Louis Gross. Will he learn from that with William Nylander? Perhaps. But what he could potentially also learn from that situation, Dave, is if conversations are extending a long time, instead of continuing conversations, maybe he looks to just flat out trade William Nylander, which could also be in the cards. Why don't we take a quick break? Let's come back because Nylander has actually landed on the Athletics trade bait board, so we could dive into that discussion just a little bit. We heard Pierre LeBrun was on Overdrive talking about this earlier today as well, so we'll touch on both of those on the other side. I'm Mike DiStefano with Dave Morassutti. You listen to Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. It's Mike DiStefano and Dave Morassutti. So we were just talking about the William Nylander situation. He is eligible to sign an extension come July 1st. However, we do know how he dug his heels the last time that he had a contract negotiation. So I would imagine that we'll see some similarities in the way that he goes about his business this time around. And if that's the case, there's a possibility based on how things went with Johnny Gaudreau and how he just, Brad Treliving had to see Gaudreau just walk out the door for nothing. Potentially, that's a learned lesson for Treliving. And if nothing gets sorted out or he feels like negotiations are going stale or they can't come close enough, potentially, Dave, do you think we could see a situation where Brad Treliving, although he says, I like these core four players, although Brendan Shanahan talked about wanting to keep them together, if this situation happens, how likely is it, do you think, we could see him deal Bill Nye the Rorschach guy?
I mean, if there is one player that you're not going to want to do that song, and LeBron did say they don't want to go through that thing where they go back and forth and, Nylander potentially. Now, good thing is Nylander won't sit out going into the season.
Right.
But what he can do is say, this is my dead date for getting a contract extension done. If we don't do it, I'm not negotiating into the season. I don't see Nylander wanting to be that guy that wants to negotiate into a season.
Can I tell you something?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that it would be Nylander putting that date. I think it'd be Treliving putting that date.
He should. And that's where I'm getting to. I think Treliving should say, you might have your date. We're going to have a much different date. Give me your 10 to 12 teams. And I think what Treliving should do in this case is if they can't get a deal done, all right, what team would you consider?
Yeah, Kachuk him.
Matt Kachuk. That's exactly where I was going at, because people will say, Florida did really well in the Kachuk trade because of the player they got. Brad Treliving did quite well getting something back for Matt Kachuk and not having what happened with Johnny Gaudreau, right? There was that situation where Kachuk really did not want to be there, and he was going to force their hand one way or the other to do something. So that's what I think they need. You have to start playing hardball somewhere. I think if you make that clear with Nylander, I think it sets a precedent with the next guy coming after, and that's Mitch Marner. Because Austin Matthews, you're not doing that really too. We already heard how much of a priority Austin Matthews is. Yeah, you're gonna want to make sure you're not just emptying out the whole treasure chest, Austin Matthews.
Right. No blank check situation, but
no. But with William Nylander and Mitch Marner, there's going to have to be a falling in line. There's a pecking order here, a little bit of priority and who's getting what. And I think if you set that precedent with Nylander, the mindset for Mitch Marner now changes a little bit, because he can't play that card like he did with like he did in his negotiation, where he didn't show up to camp right away, and we're just like, is this Nylander all over again? The Leafs got to nip this in the butt right away.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think there's got to be a drop dead date where they decide, okay, let's try to have an extension in place by maybe it's July 25th. arbitrary date, but by July 20, I know July 1st is one that a lot of people are kind of keen on, and because July 1st is the day they can sign an extension. It's also the day that Matthews and Marner's no trade clause kicks in, and then a modified no trade kicks in for Nylander. So there's a lot of fixation on that date, but honestly, I don't think that it's necessarily going to be awful if neither of those two are signed by like 12:01 p.m. on July 1st. I don't think that that's the end of the world. But if you do set that date again arbitrarily, let's say July 25th, that gives you over 3 weeks to figure it out with Austin Matthews' agents and also with William Nylander's agent. That should give you more than enough time to say, hey, are we close on something? What are you looking to get? How can we make this work? Because you don't want to walk all the way to training camp, because at that point, most teams, their cap situation's already settled and they pretty much have their roster in place. This is where, the offseason is where you have to make big plays like this. Perhaps even, maybe, you could try and do something at the draft. Now, for that to work, you can't quite do a sign and trade the way that Tkachuk did, because again, they're not eligible to do anything until July 1st. That being said, I mean, a little wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Hey, would you be willing to sign something like this? I don't know, perhaps. And all of a sudden, the trade goes down at the draft. Nylander goes elsewhere and also happens to sign an extension on July 1. That would probably make a heck of a lot of sense if that were to happen. But yeah, man, I think it's going to be interesting. I think it's more likely that we see a William Nylander trade this summer than we do have him. How am I trying to word this here? I think it's more likely we see him get traded than show up to camp without a contract. There it is. That's the way I wanted to word that there. That's what I think happened. So he's either in camp with a contract extension or he'll be traded before it even gets that far. That's my prediction on how the William Nylander situation gets dealt with this summer.
Yeah, I think Nylander's the wild card of this entire offseason for the Leafs. Like, what they do with him, whether he stays or goes, is gonna shape the way this roster is built, in my opinion. Because if he stays, your avenue to add and make other moves changes a little bit. If he's all of a sudden free on the trade market, you can get a little creative here in how you want to address certain needs if that's a possibility.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll see where that all goes, my friend. Obviously, there would be a lot of interest in a guy like William Nylander if he does, in fact, hit the trade market. Mitch Marner was actually put along, and John Tavares, actually. I'm looking right now at the others we're watching that didn't make the top 30 on the Athletics trade bait board. You do have John Tavares and you have Mitch Marner in here. I'm trying to see if there's anybody else. Matt Murray is technically also in this list, as well as the honorable mentions after the top 30. We'll see if anything like that happens. But yeah, so we'll see what happens with William Nylander. It's certainly going to be something that we'll be talking about more as the offseason progresses. Hopefully we get some information at some point as to what's going on with the Maple Leafs and what's going on with the visit that Treliving is expected to have with Austin Matthews. Hopefully we get a situation where we know what's going on with the coach, with Sheldon Keefe, get some clarity on that at the very least. So there's still a lot of stuff to get done here for Brad Treliving. Like, essentially, the only thing he has done is brought in Shane Doan. Outside of that, still 10 free agents that need contracts. They're not all going to get contracts, but you'd imagine that one of them or two of them, maybe three of them, will get brought back into the fold. I'd find it hard to believe that all 10, they're just like, nah, we're not going to bother with them. You know what I mean? So I would think that we'll get some news happening over the course of the next little bit. And I would think that it might come sooner rather than later if the Cup final ends tonight. So hopefully that does, in fact, happen for the offseason to kind of get underway. All right, buddy. Any final words? Anything else you want to say?
I am ready for the offseason. I know it's going to make it a lot busier for us, but that's a good thing. I can't wait for it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, that does it for us here today on the podcast. I'd like to thank you all for listening and supporting the show. You can subscribe to the Locked On Leafs podcast on all podcast platforms and receive daily Leafs content. Follow myself on Twitter at Mickey_Canuck. Follow Dave at D_Morassutti. Follow the show as well at Locked On Leafs. Go ahead, leave a like on this video, a comment down below. Your thoughts. How does the William Nylander situation play out this offseason? Let us know in the comment section down below. We'll be back with another episode tomorrow. But until then, keep it locked right here on Locked On Leafs.